You're listening to episode 22 of Liz's Healthy Table.
Looking for a healthy new way to feed your family without the hassle and hype? Welcome to Liz's Healthy Table, where your host, registered dietitian nutritionist Liz Weiss, serves up fresh and flavorful recipes with a tasty side of science, good nutrition, and fun. Are you and your family ready for some wholesome food that tastes great too? Don't change that dial. Your food adventure starts here.
Welcome to the show, everyone. Today, my guest is Ellie Krieger. She is a cookbook author. She's a dietitian, a mom. She hosts a show on public television called Ellie's Real Good Food, if you haven't seen it yet. And she is one of the nicest people I know. And we actually go way back. And we're going to tell you how we met. It's a good story. So I hope you'll stick around for that. And, we also have a lot of other things to talk about, like recipes. If you're a family, you're a mom, you're a dad, whoever's listening, you live on your own, you're going to want to be on the show today because Ellie has so many amazing recipes. One of them that we're going to talk about is a recipe for spinach salad with roasted squash, roasted grapes, and pumpkin seeds. Such an interesting combination. I made it the other night. Absolutely delicious. And then another recipe of Ellie's that I just made, because whenever I have a guest, I always love to cook up a storm, before they come on the show. Got to, walk the walk, talk the talk, walk the walk, however it goes. And so Ellie has a recipe that I really love. It's from her latest book, which is called You Have It Made, which, by the way, we're giving away. I'll tell you about that in a second. But the recipe is for herbed salmon, an herbed salmon casserole with Orzo and Feta cheese. Oh my gosh, it's so good. And it's funny because a couple of months ago, a friend of mine had me over for lunch, and she made this recipe that was really similar to this Orzo recipe that I just made. So I was kind of wondering, was that Ellie's recipe? She used shrimp and not salmon. So I'm wondering if it was like an Ellie recipe. So anyway, we're going to tell you a little bit about that recipe when we're deep into the show. We also have some questions that people posed on my closed Facebook group. I have this podcast posse page on Facebook. Anybody can join. It is a closed group, but hey, I'll welcome you in. All you have to do is go to lizshealthytable.com/podcast. And then in the sidebar, you'll see a little link to join the podcast posse. So go ahead and click through to that. And then when you're in the posse, you can ask me questions. You can ask my guests questions. It's just a great way to build community among our listeners. And then also in that sidebar, you will see links to iTunes, Stitcher Radio, Google Play. And then if you click through there, you can subscribe to my show that way. And of course, if you love the show, post a review while you're there. I'd appreciate it. Also, this is show 22. We are giving away a copy of You Have It Made, Ellie's most recent award-winning cookbook. It's U.S. only, but if you read the show notes, like if you go to the bottom of the show notes, where we're going to give links to all the recipes we're talking about today, you can enter the giveaway right within that post. So good luck to all of you. It's an amazing book. I have been cooking from it, as I told you. I'm not making it up. I am living, eating, breathing Ellie Krieger's recipes. Liz's Healthy Table is brought to you by the Parents on Demand Network. Now, this is an app which you can download to your phone. It's filled with parenting podcasts. So if you're a parent and you want to hear about all sorts of topics relating to parenthood, then you will definitely want to download this app. You can learn more at parentsondemand.com. Today's episode is brought to you by Super Healthy Kids. They are your one-stop shop for recipes, meal plans, and cooking videos. You can learn more at superhealthykids.com. All right, are you ready to get cooking? I most certainly am. Ellie Krieger, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here, Liz.
I know. Finally, I'm so excited. And I'll tell you, Ellie, I just don't know when you ever sleep because you've written, correct me if I'm wrong, 6 cookbooks. You've hosted several cooking shows. You write for the Washington Post. How many hours a night are we getting these days?
No, I love sleep. I am not missing sleep for anything. I do sleep, but I maybe could be watching like more TV or something. I'm missing all these good shows.
So you're not a binge TV watcher?
No, I just can't. I can't do that unless, that's probably what I do like Christmas week is like binge TV watch.
Mm-hmm. You got to catch up, right? So tell us about, we have so much to talk about, but tell me and our listeners about your latest book, You Have It Made. And I also want to hear about your new TV show, which is really not as new anymore, Ellie's Real Good Food. You're in season 2, but give us the skinny on the cookbook and then the TV show.
So I'm so excited that You Have It Made actually won the James Beard Award this past year. And it's basically what I'm always trying to do is recognize the barriers. Like what is preventing people from cooking delicious, healthy food? And one of the things is, of course, time management, like making it all happen. And you know that. I know you know that because you're doing the same kinds of recipes in terms of solution oriented for the whole family. And I know that also not only as a dietitian and as a chef, but also just as a mom who wants to get food on the table and wants to have family meals and thinks that's a real priority for me. So a key strategy, of course, is making food ahead. And so that's what this whole book, everything in it is make ahead. And make ahead and freeze or make ahead and refrigerate. But what I think is very unique about it, besides that the recipes are just delicious, I think, is that one of the things I found when I was doing research on a lot of make ahead books is that they kind of leave you hanging. Like, how long can you store it? How do you reheat it? Do you keep the foil on? Do you keep it uncovered? And so what I did was I provided for every single recipe specific instructions. I did all the work for you kind of thing. So you don't have to guess. And at first when I was writing it, I was thinking, I'm crazy, because it really made a lot more work. I mean, I had to sometimes retest things just because I wanted to test the thaw in a different way.
Right.
So it was really so much work at the time, but now I'm so glad I did it because I've gotten so much great feedback, not only on the food itself, but on the practicality of it. Like, thank you for putting in all that information. So I'm thrilled with it.
Well, I made your salmon orzo recipe, which we're going to get to a little bit later in the show. And I just had it for lunch and I love this recipe. And I do appreciate all the tips on how to freeze, how to thaw, because there are certain foods and ingredients that don't thaw well, right? There's probably a few that would be like ooey if you were to freeze it. What's kind of the one no-no when it comes to freezing?
Well, I mean, certain things I didn't even include in the book because you couldn't freeze it really well. So that didn't even go in. And that's why I was careful about that. Certain potato items really don't freeze well. They become very mushy. Some potatoes, actually, I found that like waxy potatoes can freeze, whereas the like russet potatoes, the starchier potatoes, don't freeze really. They just don't hold up. So those kinds of things. Also, creamy things typically don't freeze well. But what I found interesting was zucchini. Zucchini didn't really freeze well.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Didn't thaw well. Yeah, but I have some zucchini recipes in there, but that were just more salads and things like that would keep well in the refrigerator. So a lot of them are even like more summery foods, like summer salads and so on, that you might, want something that holds up in the fridge for a few days. So a lot of the recipes are like that.
Good stuff. And we are giving away a copy, which I teased at the top of the show. So head on over to my website, everybody, to enter. And now I want to hear a little bit about Ellie's Real Good Food, because you're in season 2. And how can people find the show, and give us sort of, the backstory of the show and how you kind of pull it all together?
Yeah. And as you know, that whole TV business is, well, I heard this once on Actor Studio, that show Actor Studio, C'est la TV. And it's always feels like this, there's really no logic to the television business to me. After the Food Network show was over, it took me many years to get another show going. And so this has been really a labor of love, because one of the things about public television is the person who produces the show needs to get the sponsors on board. They're not doing it. And so I became an executive producer of the show, essentially. I've also have a co-executive producer helping me, but essentially really driving that and becoming this person who is pulling it together on every angle, from the creative aspect to the on-camera aspect to the financial aspect, making it happen. So it's such a labor of love for me. And I'm so proud of the show. Just being on the set feels like such a privilege and so exciting that it feels like a small miracle that I'm actually there. And the feedback's been great. So it's on public television. And as many people know, public television stations, they choose what times they want to air it individually in each market. So if you go to elliesrealgoodfood.com, elliesrealgoodfood.com, there's a little thing there where you could put in your zip code and your carrier, and they'll tell you where it airs in your area.
And it's interesting because just from my podcast Posse, and we're going to get to some of the questions later, one of the questions, which I think you've already sort of touched on, came in from Carrie, and she said that her biggest roadblock to healthy eating is that she feels like she has to purchase a lot of different ingredients. Well, number one, Carrie, you should watch Ellie's show and check out her cookbooks, because I think, and you'll agree, Ellie, that your focus is really to make healthy eating easy because you don't call for lots of ingredients.
Absolutely. I don't call for lots of ingredients, and I really like to use common ingredients. So it's exciting for me, the food environment now, because it used to be that things like quinoa and farro were like difficult to find. So there's so many things that are easy to find now that maybe I felt like I couldn't use maybe a couple of years ago. So that's kind of cool. But I'm very, very careful to choose ordinary ingredients. And what I like to say is what I do is use ordinary ingredients in extraordinary ways. So maybe pairing things that you might not ordinarily think to put together. And it's right there in your grocery store. You might not have just made the connection, kind of thing. So yeah, it needs to be easy. We don't need to be running around to 10 different specialty stores. And the other thing I'm not going to do is give you an ingredient that you're going to use once and it will just stay in your drawer. I'm going to give you a bunch of different ways to use it, or ways to store it in the freezer and so on, so that if you're not going to use it frequently, at least it won't go bad.
So you mentioned that sometimes you call for two healthy ingredients and you combine them in a way people might not have thought about before, which leads me to this recipe of yours that I recently tried. It was a spinach salad with roasted butternut squash, which is like, yeah, I can do that. But also you added grapes to the mix. And so you're roasting squash and then you add grapes and you're roasting grapes, and that goes on this gorgeous salad. And that was like, oh, I've never roasted grapes. Like I cook a lot, as you know, but I love trying new recipes and I love trying new combinations. How'd you come up with this idea of combining butternut squash with grapes? I mean, it's like this 1-2 punch of beautiful natural sweetness. I love that salad.
Oh, I'm so glad you do. I do too. And it's funny because I just think I want to get some color on here. I love to have fruit in salads, and grapes are in season at the same time, kind of, that the butternut squash is in season. Sometimes it's literally the inspiration is like, what's really beautiful at the market? And so then I was going to put fresh grapes in, and I'm like, which is nice too. I love to put fresh grapes in a salad. But then I'm thinking, I'm roasting this squash anyway. Let me throw some grapes on the pan and see what happens. And it really is amazing, because the roasting, and it just takes about 20 minutes roasting, and you have everything going anyway, so it's really no extra work. But the roasting just adds that one little extra kind of level of sophistication. But I love that it really is just grapes and it takes no extra work. So that's so to the point, because that's exactly what I'm always trying to do.
And also in this recipe, you have pumpkin seeds. And so that's a very sort of wintry fall feel for me. And you like using maple syrup. I've noticed that in your recipes. So that's like that natural goodness that comes through. It's accessible. And it's just like kind of taking that recipe for me to the next level.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think in certain foods, so I try not to do added sweetener whenever possible. I really think that, I try to keep that to a minimum. But sometimes the smallest bit of added sweetener, especially in a salad dressing, a little bit of sweetener suddenly really makes it delicious. It goes from good to delicious. And sometimes it's really remarkable how that little bit of honey or that little bit of maple syrup will really transform it. And so why not? And I try to use an unrefined sweetener like maple syrup or honey whenever possible when I am looking for a little hint of sweetness in there. And a lot of times it's balancing spices. It's about flavor balance. So I think people who are completely trying to go for zero added sugars. I mean, because maple syrup and honey, of course, is an added sugar still, even though it's less refined. I think that, you don't need to do that, as we know. You don't need to go to zero. And because sometimes it literally makes healthy food compellingly delicious to put a teaspoon of maple syrup in something.
It's funny when you think of kids, right? And we're trying to always cut back on sugar in our kids' diets. That's gotten a lot of attention. But even the Academy of Pediatrics says that if you're making a bowl of oatmeal for your kids, it's okay to add a little bit of sugar. I would personally add it in the form of honey or maple syrup because that healthy food becomes so much more appealing. So I don't think we need to beat ourselves up to have a little bit of sugar, especially when it's like a honey or something like that.
Exactly.
I think I saw you making a salad dressing on a recent, or maybe not so recent, Facebook Live. For those of you listening, Ellie does a Facebook Live, mostly cooking demo, right, every Wednesday. And I think you were doing dressings, but tell everybody a little bit about your Facebook Live that you do every week, because it's a great way for people to connect with you.
Oh, yes. I hope people tune into it. So it's every Wednesday at 4 p.m. Eastern, and I do it from my test kitchen. And, I started off, this is like an interesting format. And I just literally started off doing it with my phone in my hand, just like messing around. And it's funny because my fire alarm went off. I was showing people how to kind of cook an eggplant or something on the stove, and my fire alarm went off, and it was really embarrassing and funny. But now I know to take my fire alarm down because literally my fire alarm goes off if I make toast around here.
Oops.
But I'm not like causing fires. But in any event, I've really come to love it. I mean, I think it's so wonderful to be able to really interact with people in real time and take questions and talk about different things. And I try to keep them really, not too long, between 10 and 15 minutes. And I just like cover one topic. It may be a recipe. It may be, looking at different kinds of dressings and what's the real like formula for making a good dressing. So that was one. Another time I looked at all different kinds of citrus fruits. Another time I looked at all different kinds of squash and talked about how to prepare each one, which squash is good for what recipes and so on. And then really it's also a community because it's really everyone's sharing their ideas in the comment section. And I'm answering some questions, but then people are talking to each other even in the comment section, and everyone's contributing their own ideas because there's so many good cooks out there and so much great forum for sharing ideas. And I love that about the Facebook Live, and I'm going to continue to do it every week.
Good for you. And that's really, I think, a great example of how Facebook can work to our advantage. They come under fire every now and then. So, using that existing community. So everybody, I'll give a link to Ellie's Facebook in the show notes. So head on over to lizshealthytable.com/podcast, and you'll find the show notes there. So you are a mom, you have a daughter, and I want to say she's probably a teenager by now. Is that right?
Yes, she's 15.
Oh, wow. How'd that happen?
Time does fly.
Hey, was she ever picky? And if she ever went through a picky eating phase, what'd you do about it?
I have to say she never was a picky kid per se. But I felt like most of her quote unquote pickiness was more of a power struggle. So I would make something when she was little, I don't know, 4 or 5 years old, 6. I would make something and she would love it and just gobble it up. And then the next week I would make it and she'd say, I don't like that. Like, oh my God. And literally every part of my body just like turned into a big knot when she would do that. But I would say, well, more for me. And I would force myself to say more for me. And just pretend not to care that she didn't want it. Even though it drove me nuts, I really didn't give up my poker face. And I really think for her, and every child's different, for her, that's what I needed to not make it a battle. Because she would have loved the battle and she would have probably won. So just not make it a battle. I'm definitely in this is what's for dinner camp. And after dinner, there's no snack. Like you could have, when she was real little, I would say after dinner, you could have milk and or fruit. And those are the two options if you're real hungry after dinner. So I thought it was important that she didn't feel like she could just snack the night away skipping dinner. So I think she definitely tried things because of that, because she'd be hungry otherwise, or just be bored with milk or fruit. So not that those are boring foods, but it's not as enticing as a whole big snack drawer, right?
That's right. No, I love that. I love that philosophy of kind of not giving up your poker face, because kids are so smart. And when they see parents starting to get stressed out, they're like, I see a reaction. I'm going to throw dinner on the kitchen floor. Why not?
Exactly. Oh, I remember also the temper tantrum, the very first complete tantrum when she was about 2 years old. And I insisted that she shut the TV off because we're going to have dinner now. And I remember she completely freaked out. She completely was like, I was pouring hot oil on her. I mean, it was like, thought the neighbors would come over. She freaked out. And I remember this little thing went off in my head that was like, oh, maybe I should just let her keep it on this one. What's the big deal? And I'm like, you know what? I have to set a precedent now. There is going to be no electronics at our table, near our table, ever. And so I stuck with it, and it was really, really hard. I mean, I remember feeling so exhausted when they're that little and they're freaking out like that. But to this day, I'm so glad I stuck with my guns and was like, all right, you can go freak out over there. We're going to eat dinner.
Come back when you chill out. Well, it's like
exactly.
It's like the Ferberizing. Remember, you had to Ferberize your baby, and they'd have to cry a few times through the night. It was the hardest thing ever, but then they slept through the night. So it's always painful at first, and then they kind of get in the habit. They get it. They know the rules. It all works out.
Yeah, and she doesn't like everything, but I put enough variety at a meal that if she, that she'll find something, and every meal might not be the world's most complete meal. Like when she was about 5 years old, we took her to France with us, and we took her to this Moroccan restaurant. And so she ate chickpeas, and she ate some couscous. And she didn't have the most balanced meal, but you know what? Just the idea that she could go anywhere and find something to satisfy her that was nutritious, and then ultimately it builds her palate. So that was my goal always. And it's worked out.
and now she's 15. So what's the favorite family meal these days? What's Ellie serving for dinner in her house that everybody loves?
Oh my gosh. Well, one of our favorites is we really are big fish eaters. We really love fish. And actually the salmon and Orzo dish that you love is one of our family favorites, 100%. But another one is, oh gosh, yeah, I think it's in this book. I forget. But it's sole with like a crispy breadcrumb kind of topping, and I do it with just like these homemade whole grain breadcrumbs, and just like seasoned breadcrumbs and sole with some roasted vegetables is a favorite. And so we're big fish eaters, that's for sure. And then I love like taco night and pasta night kind of thing, but always doing something kind of fun with it. And usually like taco night for us is more like soft tacos with sometimes it's fish tacos. It depends on the season. Love that kind of thing.
Yeah. Pretty much every Sunday we do fish tacos, because my husband, Tim, is like completely obsessed I don't know where he got it in his head, but it's like, we always have to have fish tacos. So, but it's easy, it's actually easy to make. And I recently I talked about it on a past podcast. I can't remember which episode, but a salmon taco recipe that was just so good, with roasted bell peppers and red onion. And then, of course, you have cilantro and guacamole. It is just, I love it. It's so good.
Sounds great. So you can't go wrong with that.
You can't. So a lot of people in my world here will always say, I'm at a loss for what to make for dinner. I need a fast idea. I'm not a good planner. What do I do? And so I'm curious from you, Ellie, if you were to walk in the door at 5 o'clock and have no idea what you're making for family dinner that night, but your, pantry's well stocked, what might you throw together? What's kind of your go-to throw together?
So it means I'm not going. So I oftentimes, if I have nothing at home, I can walk kind of easily in New York City. I can stop by the store right before I get home. So it's really easy for me to make that stop. And I might just pick up a piece of fish and a head of broccoli and some potatoes. And then you just kind of like throw everything on a sheet pan, basically. So that's kind of easy. And even just salt and pepper and lemon juice, it doesn't even have to be. And I find that delicious. So that kind of meal I just love. Definitely love to make pasta. like as in terms of a pantry meal, a can of tomatoes, a can of white beans, maybe some pesto that I have frozen. So keeping freezer pantry stocked, maybe some shrimp even, and some frozen spinach. I mean, any kind of combination of those things is going to make for a really healthy, easy dinner. Some toasted garlic or something. And it depends on the season, because in the summer, I mean, if I just have some tomatoes, some fresh tomatoes and garlic, then, you know, that could be the base for so many great things. I actually find it kind of fun to have just a few things in the cupboard and think like, how can I make something fabulous? Like it becomes a little bit of that grocery box challenge for me. Mm-hmm. I know that sounds insane, but it kind of feels like, okay, this is like a creative opportunity. And even like jarred tuna. I love the tuna in olive oil, those jars of really good quality Italian tuna. I always have that. And that's nice in pasta too, with like a simple tomato sauce.
Now I'm getting hungry, even though I just ate your salmon and orzo. So before we get to the salmon with orzo, you mentioned sheet pan suppers. Put everything on a sheet pan, you said. And it reminded me of a conversation you and I had just yesterday about your next cookbook, the book you're working on. Can you give everybody a little teaser of what your next book is all about?
Yeah. And it's funny because I am in that like sheet pan mode right now, but it's not a sheet pan dinner book. It's called Whole in One, WHOLE. So it's a whole complete meals, whole food in one vessel. So it's one pot, one skillet, one sheet pan. And it's just another way of saying like, hey, this doesn't have to be hard. This could be all really contained. Like sometimes life feels really uncontained, maybe more often than not. At least dinner can kind of be in this like one vessel in a sort of simple way, but also absolutely delicious. And for each recipe, always trying to look for something really inspiring to do that's not difficult, as we mentioned.
I love the one vessel idea because that means less cleanup. And for me, cleanup is a huge barrier. I can't stand it. I don't like to empty the dishwasher. I have 2 boys, so they are my helpers. But I think it's going to be a big success. So I'm looking forward to seeing it.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, my husband does all the dishes. Thank goodness. Mm-hmm. It's one of the, I would so much rather cook and prep and let him do the dishes. So really, you know, I technically don't have to do a one pot cookbook. So it's my favor to him. It's my little favor to him.
He's like, thank you for doing this book. So should we tell people how you and I first met? Because it was quite some time ago. You want to tell everybody how Liz and Ellie met?
Yeah. And actually, you're amazing. I mean, so I think this reveals a lot about you, Liz. I don't know if you remember this part of it. So Liz was working at CNN as a producer of, what was the name of it? Nutrition News Unit.
Yeah, it was Nutrition News, and we had a weekend program called On the Menu.
Yes. And you took me on as an intern. Mm-hmm. And so I was living in New York at the time. And so I came to stay in Atlanta and you helped me. So this is the part that I think is really revealing about you. You helped me find, not only did you take me on as an intern, you helped me find a place to live and connected me with someone where I could, rent a room from her. But that didn't work out right away. So I stayed with you for a few days. You let me stay in your home, in your little guest room for a few days, which is really not something that the average producer is going to do. So I just really, to this day, I'm so grateful for that. And it was such an important opportunity for me and a way for me to understand how the media business works in terms of health reporting. And I learned so much. And I also really appreciated your generosity.
Well, I hope the bed was comfortable.
I don't remember that. I remember just being so nervous about the whole entire thing at the time.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny. I love having interns. You probably do too, because they're so earnest and sweet and they work so hard. And of course, back in the day when we could at CNN get a dietitian as an intern, we were like, bring it on, because we loved having more of our people around to help us, research stories and interview people and kind of understand the science of nutrition so that we could kind of bring it to life on TV. And then, of course, you went on to have your own show on the Food Network, and now you're on public television. So it's just been really fun watching you all these years. And I will say, I love all your cookbooks. And I always love to see what you're going to be wearing, because it's like, okay, yellow on this one. She's wearing a lavender sweater on this one, a hot pink on the other one.
What do you think for the next color? I don't know.
Oh my gosh, I have to look at all your books to see what color is missing. What color? I don't know. What do you think, Ellie?
Maybe I'll go ombre on this one. I don't know.
Do something like a rainbow, or I don't know. Yeah. So Ellie and I go way back, and I'm super excited that you're on the show. And obviously everybody in my podcast posse was excited, because I got a bunch of questions that came in, including this one from Rachel T. Meyer. She wrote a book called From Freezer to Table, which is a phenomenal cookbook. And she was on episode 11. She did a freezer cooking show with us, but she kind of wanted to know how you got your start at the Food Network. Like, how did that all happen?
Yeah, so again, kind of going back to this idea of Selah TV, because to me, it's a bit of a mystery, to be honest with you. I mean, it was many steps. And my mom, I quote my mom a lot because she's such a wise person. But she says that back then, even when I got the Food Network show, she's like, you're an overnight success, 15 years in the making. And it was like really true. Like, I did my master's in nutrition education with a minor in journalism. So I was trying to get really focusing on writing and journalism, media in general. And then I did the internship with you and really learned, you and Carolyn O'Neill, and really learned how the business kind of works, more or less. Then I did an internship back in New York and at CBS. So I got a kind of a grasp of what I need to do to kind of get myself into the media. So then I just started pitching myself. So becoming my own publicist, pitching ideas, pitching myself to different local stations and so on, and really getting a lot of no. At the same time, pitching article ideas too, because I wanted to, write as well. Getting a lot of no, but eventually someone says yes, and I wound up being a guest on the Food Network on a few shows, because here I'm based in New York, which definitely helped. So they'd call me in. So as a guest, then suddenly I'm on their radar. And eventually I was on the right person's radar, because one of the producers was looking for a host of a television show called Living Better, and which I wound up booking, and it was Living Better with Ellie Krieger, and that was a nationally syndicated show. And so I did that for a couple of years, and then I literally went 4 years and sort of trying to figure out where my next TV thing was, pitching the Food Network, pitching all these people, but really not getting any feedback, it wasn't landing anywhere. And I was getting offers for TV jobs, but not ones that I felt good about doing. And that was a really big differentiation for me, because I'd rather do no TV show than do one where I'm selling some kind of diet shake or something, which there were opportunities like that. Oh, you can be they want you to play the role of the evil nutritionist or something, of the stern nutritionist. So I didn't want that. So I rejected a few opportunities. But anyway, eventually I literally got a phone call on my answering machine, which I still had an answering machine at the time, Bob Tushman leaving me a message. Bob Tushman, the producer at the Food Network, saying, oh, we saw your book. So I had written, after my initial TV show, the Living Better one, I wrote a book, and they found my book basically and called me and said, oh, we'd love to talk to you. So it was from that. It was about a year after that initial meeting that we got the green light. We had to do the pilot, and it was all these meetings and interviews and so on. And about a year after that is when we got the green light for Healthy Appetite. And that was 5 seasons.
So much work. I mean, people think, oh, she has a TV show. Like you said, like 15 years. Are you kidding me? It's just like, wow.
Yeah, and so when people ask me, it's like, how do you get a show? I literally, my answer to them, the short answer is, I have really no idea. You just keep trying to get one.
If you have 15 years, maybe it'll happen.
Well, that's why I say to people, who are interested in the media work, and you're certainly more of an expert than I am at this in terms of all the layers of it. Really, you have to have a diverse set of skills, interests, and pursuits in the media. You can't just say, oh, I want to have a TV show, and that's it, and just rely on that dream in and of itself. I think there really needs to be a lot of diversification in terms of what kinds of skills you have. And even now, especially with the Facebook Live and all the new media, you really have to be very nimble and be willing to try different types of media. So not to get stuck in one mindset
right.
at all.
Yeah, because you're doing Facebook Live, you've got the Washington Post, you're writing cookbooks. So it's like you kind of wear many hats and you're doing different things. And I think it keeps life exciting. And
I agree.
And you have so many recipes. I'm just amazed. And now finally, ta-da, the herbed salmon and orzo casserole with feta. So this recipe, I teased at the top of the show that I had been at my friend's house. She had made this recipe with orzo and shrimp and tomatoes. It really reminded me of this recipe. So I was wondering if this was the recipe she made and maybe tweaked it and used shrimp instead. But then you told me that you have another sort of similar recipe with orzo and shrimp. So maybe it was that one. I don't know, but I love this recipe. And it was so easy because it was just one pot. Now, I used my Le Creuset because I realized I don't have like an oven-safe, large, sort of shallow, high-sided skillet, if you will, but it worked out really well. So tell everybody a little bit about this recipe and why it is such easy. It sounds gourmet, but why it's so easy.
Oh, yeah. So first of all, I have a real adoration for Greek island cuisine kind of thing. Just those flavors, those Greek flavors of like lemon and herbs and seafood and fresh vegetables. So I love that, the Greek flavors. And I actually love going to Greek restaurants and stuff and so on. So the recipe, the shrimp one that you're talking about with the tomatoes, is sort of, sounds like one of my other recipes. It's a slight different take, but it's similar type of thing with this Greek flavors. And Greek cuisine is very similar to Italian cuisine in that it's really simple. It comes together in this way that sort of the whole thing's elevated. And so this is basically a skillet meal, and it's, you know, some scallions, and you basically cook the orzo right in the skillet in some broth. And orzo cooks really quickly, but you don't have to cook it and drain it. You know, it cooks right in the broth there, and it kind of thickens the broth, so it makes like a beautiful sauce. And then you just put in fresh tomatoes, fresh spinach, parsley, dill, lemon. And then at the end, you put in some nice fat chunks of salmon. You could use any kind of fish, really. You could even put shrimp in there if you wanted. And then you just cook it for like 4 to 5 minutes until it's just cooked through, but still really tender. And that is it, basically. You just,
you have to add feta.
You got to put the feta on top. So then you put the feta on top, and you put it in the oven. Just let that feta melt, and it's lovely. And the feta just gives this kind of briny, salty, strong taste that balances all the lemony herbaceousness of the rest of it. So it's healthy, delicious, easy. To me, it checks all the boxes.
So the sweet spot between delicious and healthy, which is kind of your motto, right? That's your mantra.
Is.
It's Ellie's mantra.
That's what I say at the end of every show, that it's all about hitting the sweet spot where delicious and healthy meet. And so that's literally my mission in life, personally and professionally, I have to say.
Yeah, I mean, we really want people to eat healthy. We want to make it fun. We want to make it easy. And I think you've achieved that. I have a few more questions here from the podcast posse. Kristen, who has been a longtime fan of mine, and I love her. So hi, Kristen. She loves you too, by the way. She put a big heart next to her name, like, I love Ellie, big heart emoji. But she wants to know, she said 2016 kale, 2017 cauliflower. What's going to be the it vegetable in 2018? Any opinions?
Well, I have to say that I have been rooting for Brussels sprouts.
I had a feeling you were going to say that.
I was actually, for me, it was a tie last year between cauliflower and Brussels sprouts. So I'm going to say this might be the year of the Brussels sprout. And I think it deserves it. It deserves it. They're pretty versatile.
You have a recipe also you have it made for like a shaved Brussels sprout salad with apricots. I actually bought the ingredients for that. Thank you very much. So, yeah, so I think we're on the same Brussels sprouts wavelength.
Yeah, they're so good. And roasting them, I have such a good recipe from the show. If you go to the show website, every show episode, I do a 3-ingredient recipe. It's remarkable. And I get salt, pepper, and oil free in my 3-ingredient recipe. So this one, the ingredients are Brussels sprouts, onion, and egg. And you basically just cook the Brussels sprouts and onions. You cook the onions until they're like really, really brown and crisped. And then you cook like the shaved Brussels sprouts in there until it's like all brown and hashy. And then you put an egg on top. I'm telling you, that is so good. And it's 3 ingredients.
So it's a hash. So you slice those Brussels sprouts. It's like a hash.
Yeah, exactly.
That sounds like my kind of recipe.
It's so good.
I love it. I love it.
A little hot sauce maybe. That would be a fourth ingredient, I suppose. But
we'll give it to you. Oh my gosh, I have so many questions from my people. Let's go through them really quickly. Marie, she wants to know, do you eat dessert? Do you eat it every day? What's your go-to dessert?
All right. So I'm not thankfully, I'm not drawn by my sweet tooth too often, but I do eat dessert. If there's a really good chocolate cake at a restaurant that I go to, I'm going to get it and share it with the table, hopefully. But I'm usually if it's chocolate, I'm in. And at home, I might have, I always have dark chocolate on hand. Mm-hmm. And I actually have my own private stash, because if I don't have my own private stash, my husband and daughter just eat it all up before I can get at it. So I usually do have the stash of chocolate. I love dark chocolate with nuts in it, or sea salt or something. So I would say that is what I enjoy the most dessert wise.
You are my kindred spirit, because I am a dark chocolate girl. I love it with sea salt. I love it with caramel. And I also have to kind of quote unquote hide it, because my husband, he eats it like he'll pop in a piece of,
yes.
like I'm like, whoa, slow down, chew it, enjoy it. You do not deserve to eat that if you're going to eat it that quickly. I'm sorry. Yeah, I need my own little stash too. I'm with you on that one.
Completely. Although I've learned that if I want to hide something from my husband in the refrigerator, all I have to do is put it behind one other thing.
Yeah, you think? Because they open, not to bash the husbands, but they do. They're so funny. They open the fridge and they're like, where's the eggs? Right in front of you. I don't see the eggs. No, they're in front of you. Really? Yes, look in front of you. They're funny creatures, those husbands. So last question. This is from Krista. And this was a really interesting question. And she said that she had sent her child to school with my grab-and-go granola bars, which are actually made with whole grain cereal and dried fruit and dark chocolate. Anyway, her child got teased for bringing this healthy food to school, kind of like shaming, right? Healthy food shaming, food shaming. And it made me think about Josh when he was younger. He's now 22, but when he was in elementary school, I made tuna salad for him one day, and I added some shredded carrot. And Antonio DeRamio, wherever you are, he teased Josh, and Josh wouldn't eat his lunch, and he came home and he was hungry and he just lost it. It's a really hard thing when your child's being sort of shamed because they're either eating a school lunch they had to buy, or maybe it was a free or reduced lunch, or they brought a healthy food, or maybe not even a healthy food. How do you handle that? That's a tough one.
It really is. And why can children be so cruel? I mean, it's heartbreaking. And to be the parent of a child on either end, to be the parent that maybe your child even did that, you're horrified. Mm-hmm. And then the parent on the other end of it. I mean, and I think it's any type of being different. I remember when my school lunches were sardine sandwiches. How about that?
No wonder you have such a healthy heart.
Well, I was sitting all by myself in the lunchroom, trust me. Daddy, please just make me a turkey sandwich. Yeah, I think it's heartbreaking, but I think it's not only necessarily health food shaming, it's just any kind of different foods shaming. Sometimes it's a cultural thing, so that if someone brings, I don't know, pita bread and hummus or something, just if they're, that's what their family eats, then what kind of weird bread is that? Or there's always that kind of, if you're different in any way. So I would say, I mean, I don't know if it's worth getting the school administration involved, but there may be some education needed in terms of like teaching other people not to yuck each other's yum kind of thing, and to be respectful of differences. And maybe that's a larger piece of it, really. But I would, I don't know. What do you say? How do you, I don't think you should change your way.
No. And it's a tough one too, because you could say to your 10-year-old, like I might have said to Josh at the time, just say to Antonio, well, you're just jealous of my sandwich because it's so delicious. Or, Krista's child could say, oh, you don't like chocolate? Oh, because these have chocolate and they're so good. If you want, I'll bring you some next time. Or, but it's
right.
We could tell our kids that, but that's tough for them to kind of implement, I think. So it's a dilemma, most definitely.
But don't change what you're doing. I guess what I would say, don't change the child lunch because of that.
Right.
Like help to try to give them strategies of saying, whatever that may be, maybe depending on their age and the culture of the school, maybe it is getting the teachers to discuss it in a larger way.
Right.
Or maybe it is giving them tools of saying like, okay, that's okay. You don't have to eat it. It's not for you anyway. It's for me.
Yeah.
Or some tools like that. But I would say the worst thing would be to change what you put in your child's lunchbox because of that.
Mm-hmm. Right. Stick to your guns.
Yeah.
If you love it, stick with it.
And eventually you're teaching your child also the same thing, that to be who they are.
Right. Be yourself.
Not everyone has to like it.
That's right. It's what makes the world go round. Variety is the spice of life. So I always love to ask my guests before we wrap it up about their favorite cookbook right now. I mean, I know personally I've got like 600 books on my shelf. I have my favorites. Do you have right now a favorite, a book that you turn to time and time again? What is it?
Completely. So there's a book called Vegetables by James Peterson. And it's literally every vegetable, how long it takes to roast it, how long it takes to steam it, how to cut it the best way, what to look for. And actually, I think I just read, because the book came out in like 1998, I think I just read that he's doing a revision of it, which I'm going to snap that up right away, because I use cookbooks more as like resources as opposed to following recipes exactly. And that one I've found to be, it has some wonderful recipes, but I've also just found it to be an incredible resource when it comes to any questions I might have for something I found at the farmer's market. What do I do with a cardoon? Let me look it up in the vegetables book. So it has some really wonderful recipes, and it's just called Vegetables.
I will check it out. Thank you. So anything else you want to say, Ellie, before we let you off the hook? Because you've got a lot of recipes to test for that new cookbook.
Putting me back to work then, are you?
I'll say.
No, it's so wonderful. I'm thrilled to be on your show, and you do such a great job. And thanks everyone for all the questions, and just a pleasure to be here. So thank you.
Well, thank you. It was great having you. And thanks, everybody, for tuning in today. Remember to subscribe to the show on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play. And if you love the show, please go ahead and post a review. And stop by liz'shealthytable.com/podcast, because we're giving away a copy of Ellie's cookbook, You Haven't Made. It's for U.S. only, just a friendly reminder. So head on over. Check it out. Enter the giveaway. I've got so many links and resources for you. This was a great show. And until next time, thanks for listening to Liz's Healthy Table.